This isn't what we would call quantum, and it's not 100% in now time, but I want you to sort of see the word. We have sentences that become quite wordy, and there's lots of little joining words in amongst them. And that's where things can go wrong and become open to interpretation. But English is also, what you'll find, English is in the wrong order compared to other languages, like compared to Chinese in particular. We go the other way. And I know that we had a fellow Czechoslovakian who couldn't speak English when he came to the country. But when he learned English, he had more success in understanding the Chinese who couldn't speak English when they spoke English than he could the other people on the work site that could speak, that English was their first language. So he found the way the Chinese misspoke was more consistent with his language, with the order of operations between the words. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you only know one language, you wouldn't be aware of it. But for people who have more than one language, they know that English doesn't follow the same conventions as other language, and there's a reason for that. So with this was like a follow-up to a letter that I'm working. It's not totally complete, but for the most part it's there. So through the issuance of the medical experimentation participation ultimatum addressing myself. Now, normally what we would do is we would put a number of words between those words and sort of spread it out, but it's not actually necessary. And if you start bringing them together and you bring them together in the correct order, and this is only something that you've actually got to go through the process and experience it to see what happens, you can have a sentence that makes sense, that contains all those elements within it. When you start combining the terms together, they change their order. So the words that were at the latter part of the sentence start to come more through to the beginning. And that, well, to me, that makes sense. Medical experimentation participation ultimatum, which is what we've got. We've got the jab, which is a medical experiment. They're making people to participate in it. And the ultimatum is do it or lose your job. So it's medical experimentation participation ultimatum. And if I was doing quantum or correct sentence structure, communication, passe, syntax, grammar, that medical experimentation participation ultimatum would all be hyphenated. So it would be one term and you can't break it apart. So whenever you make reference to ultimatum, you're actually still making reference to medical experimentation participation ultimatum. And if needed, you can explain what that is in a sentence. But for the paperwork, it's concise, it's precise, that's what it is. And it's still open to refining, to further refinement. And if you keep in mind that language is something that's living, and as we gain experience and we gain more knowledge, we can apply it to the language that we're using. So here, addressing myself, and I think it's always important to assume that the judge, if there was a judge reading it, that if you say me in your document, he's going to apply it to himself and then make you wrong. So we make sure that there's no ambiguity there. And with myself, Stephen Limbury, is through the persons, people, and I put persons and people because persons and people are distinct to each other. But just to cover anything that's living that's participating or the person. So persons, people addressed in this communication. Now, when it comes to quantum, addressed is in the past. So that's what I'm showing you, that this isn't pure quantum because that term addressed is in the past. And if I was doing it in quantum, it wouldn't be written that way. Addressed in this communication. And I, Stephen Limbury, am with the requisition of the answers acknowledging the following questions. With the understanding, I, Stephen Limbury, am seeking clarification on this matter. And now the other thing that we understand is that if you put full stops in the middle of your document, excuse me for just a second, sorry about that. Yeah, so language is you can grandfather your documents, that's what that means. So if you've written something today and you find out tomorrow that it's incorrect, your only obligation or duty is to correct it. And there's no problem with that. So you give up your mistakes, you perfect things, and that's what you do with your documentation. And sometimes it's handy to keep past versions of what you've been writing so that you can become aware of the change that you've experienced in what you're learning and how your documents have progressed. Or in some cases, you might regress. You might actually get worse when you start to overthink things. And it's always good to have other people to refer it to and discuss things with to make sure you don't get carried away in your own version of things. Now, for the burden of proof, I put that in inverted commas. That's a term that is people understand what that is. For the burden of proof of the responsible superior authority delegation. So what I'm talking about there, responsible superior authority delegation, your boss or the person that's communicating with you is saying, hey, it's not me, we've been told. So I'm just passing the message on. Really? Well, if that's the case, you've got delegation. You've been delegated that position. And I want to see the evidence that you've been delegated that position. Otherwise, you have no authority to do it. So that's what we're doing. Now, we've all experienced, either through ourselves or through other people, that they don't care. They'll just wash over the top of you. So, but we are getting people, there's more and more people getting on board with doing this, with what we're doing, and we're getting a greater pool of knowledge that we can bring to bear. So for the burden of proof of the responsible superior authority delegation is with the person's people communicating the demands of the compulsory medical experimentation participation. And I can open this up to people who want to ask questions about it, clarification or suggest a change, or why do you do that? Please do that. So for the satisfaction of the burden of proof is with the production of the delegation of the authority authorization with the signature by the superior authority with full commercial liability. So we're introducing terms there that, like, we're not mucking about. If you're compelling me to do something, you don't have the authority to do it, I'm going to take action against you. Now, the biggest issue, of course, we've got is the corrupt legal system and navigating through that. But there is legislation there that we can use that they have to tell us it doesn't apply. But we've got to be careful. We've got to make sure we get it through there the right way. But ultimately, if we get enough people on board and we can hold a common law court sitting as a Crown Commission, what we can do then is sit as a Crown Commission. We can function as a tribunal where what we are doing is actually certifying or ratifying that a procedure somebody has carried out, like a 3-step process, has been carried out appropriately, and we can certify that as being a correct process with the view to establishing a claim against the parties that have forced the unlawful action on us. So the non-participation in communication is confirmation through tacit agreement of the void lawful authority for the medical experimentation, participation, imposition of life-changing, threatening medical procedures on me, Stephen Limbury, for my chosen career path continuance by the manager of Qantas, for argument's sake.
Comma. I need a comma there, Murray.
Where? After representative?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's all right. I always like to leave a space for you to participate. So the medical experimentation, participation, imposition is not a part of my, Stephen Limbury's, job description. Now, the other thing that I bring up too, for some people in the medical industry, when they signed on to the fact that they would take required vaccination. Well, that's fine. What you've got to look at is what the definition of vaccination was at the point of time that you signed up, because that is the definition that you signed on for. So if they've modified the definition of vaccination and they're now covering a procedure that would not have qualified under the original definition of vaccination, you are not obligated to that definition of vaccination. Your obligation that you took on was to the definition of vaccination that applied at the time that you entered that contract. And that's important. That's not just picking. You can't sort of bring legislation in and then make it retrospective and pick you up and make you wrong for something when what you were carrying out was a lawful thing and nobody was harmed, of course. So this medical experimentation, participation, imposition is not a part of my, Stephen Limbury, job description, and I, Stephen Limbury, requisition the risk assessment carried out.
Well, that sentence didn't need the that in it. It still makes sense without the that, doesn't it?
Where am I? I'm just confused.
At the second red bit down, just before the second red bit is a that.
I, Stephen Limbury, requisition the risk assessment carried out for the injectable substances. Manager so-and-so is making a requirement of the job performance. Correct. Basic sort of, that stands as a pronoun. It's standing for something. And in this case, it's superfluous to our needs. It doesn't give us clarification, not required. So
Therefore, does it need a comma after substances? After the where your mouse is now.
You've been spending too much time with me.
It's good though. I enjoy it.
No, it is. So commas also help when you need a breath. So I, Stephen Limbury, requisition the risk assessment carried out for the injectable substances manager, whatever his name is making a requirement of the job performance. Response in writing with full commercial liability is required within 7 days, enabling me, Stephen Limbury, in the making of an informed decision under duress and coercion through the means of blackmail. And denial of the significance of the Clearfield Doctrine is potentially fatal. Now, this is something I think we've touched on before, but I thought that we could utilise it. So, and I noticed we've got Agent Swift come into the room, so he can give some explanation here as well, because I'm sure that he's familiar with it, or he's making himself familiar with it. So the Clearfield Doctrine is, when private commercial paper is used by corporate government, then government loses its sovereignty status and becomes no different than a mere private corporation. As such, government then becomes bound by the rules and laws that govern private corporations, which means that if they intend to compel an individual to some specific performance based upon its corporate statutes or corporation rules, then the government, like any private corporation, must be the holder in due course of a contract or other commercial agreement between it and the one upon whom demands for specific performance are made. And further, the government must be willing to enter the contract or commercial agreement into evidence before trying to get to the court to enforce its demands, called statutes. Now, that's Clearfield Trust Co. versus United States, 318 US 363-371, not from 1942. Now, even in New South Wales with AFL solicitors and whatever, you would have heard certain references to US case law. So that's something that we can use as well. Now, are you there, Agent Swift? There you are. And you're How are you, mate?
Hey, very good.
Okay, can you...
Sorry I didn't stay long.
Pardon?
Yeah, I can point out a few things in that. First sentence, the Clearfield Doctrine is when private commercial paper, which is A4, is used by corporate governments. So corporate, how can you have a corporate government? There must be just government, shouldn't they, really?
Well, they should.
Government
loses. The point is that they're a corporation. Now, would private commercial paper also be money?
Yeah, and that's like a check size as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is close to the money size.
Yeah.
Military scripts. And
so for
argument's they're talking about...
For argument's sake, just on that, on the private commercial paper, would I be right in thinking on the 14th of February 1966, when they brought in decimal currency, that was private script, private commercial paper? Would that apply?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think you'd be right with that, mate. Yeah, I think so. Because it's all under military. That's why it's called script, because we're scripted.
Yep.
In the military. Hey?
We're conned.
Yeah. Yep.
You're accepting the script.
Yep. We've been sold a lie. We've been sold a lie, and most people have bought into it. I know you said that, but it's very relevant for now.
Yep.
And private corporations are governed under the Unijoint principle. Westland signed us on to that, same time as he signed us on to the United Nations.
Yep. So that was
1973. Yep. So when they're talking about private contracts, that's where it will go back to, the Unijoint principle, which is just down the road from Rome.
Yep.
Because all roads lead to Rome.
Yep. So do you see anything else in there that you want to clarify? Or
bound by rules of law on the government private corporation, which means they've intended to compel an individual to some specific performance based upon its corporate statutes.
Statutes.
Yeah. So if you bring it back to the Unijoint principle and the under the UN Labour Code, then statutes are military.
So how do you spell that, Rick?
Labour Code.
Yes.
Liber, and you can always say from some research I've been doing, it's spelled Lieber code. It seems to be exactly the same. But in the United Nations, they call it the Liber Code. Yes, Liber and Lieber. One was created by Abraham Lincoln in the Civil Wars, and the Liber was created by the United Nations.
Okay, do you think that
So
there's
when they
to obscure one with the other?
No, because I think they're pretty much the same
So why would we need something if we already had it?
with the Liber Code.
Yeah, if the Liber Code was already there and the one the United Nations brought in was for the same, why would they need to bring it in?
Oh, maybe they wanted to model off of that one. I'm not sure. We signed the treaty with them, and they call it the Liber Code.
Yeah, because I must admit I'm not sort of familiar with. I haven't read through them.
Yes. So when they're talking about holder in due course, that's to do with bills being exchanged.
Yeah.
Because the holder in
Well,
due course, all that means is yes, yeah, and if it's talking about the holder in due course, that's to do with the Bills of Exchange Acts, 1882, and there's a few of them, 1882, 1909, the International Bills of Exchange. Holder in due course actually means doesn't matter how it got to you, like it can be hand delivered to you, sent in registered post, or any other way. You're the holder in whatever course it took to get to you. That's what holder in due course means.
So would this mean that we would be looking to put the government into a position that they have to prove that they're not a private corporation?
Well, they should be able to prove they are a government, shouldn't they? But they can't, because we're not actually going under anything that's actually a rule of law, because their colour of law isn't the rule of law.
Yeah.
Which is a statute act, what they're talking about right here.
Yeah.
There's corporate statutes. Doesn't say government either. So this can still be used against them.
And asking them to prove that man-made laws apply to man, to living beings, sentient beings.
Yep. And how do these acts apply to us if we can't practice law? Because statute acts. So what's this document, brothers?
I wrote it. I didn't write the Clearfield Doctrine, but no,
Or the rest
I just
of it?
wrote the rest. What I was doing is we've still got people in different stages of on the road to losing their job for not participating with this garbage. And I'm just trying to really gather information or gather evidence, and I'm also trying to morph the language into something that is not as compatible for a lawyer to participate with. So it's also sort of, if you've got the ability to demonstrate a point that the legalese is really such a deceptive tool, and if you can explain, what I found like with David Wynne-Miller is you can write anything that you want and it has credibility if you're able to explain it, if you've got the logic that goes with it to demonstrate how it works. So I think you might not have been here in the beginning, but for example, up the top where I've got medical experimentation participation ultimatum. So what I'm saying is there's an ultimatum that you have to participate with medical experimentation, ultimately to keep your job. So, and the issuance, of course, is putting that forth, somebody putting that forth, and we want to know who it is. And we want to know who's accepting their full commercial liability for issuing that demand. Now, the wording's interesting because it's sort of not a demand, it is a demand, but the way they're doing it, they're saying, oh, it's not compulsory because you can leave. Well, that's just, somebody else can come up with a word for what that is.
Maybe we should start our own dictionary and start making these words up so we can actually describe what we mean. Because there isn't some words, like pure evil. These people go beyond that, so how do you describe it?
Yeah, okay, well, it's a pile of cuck, and you can go to etymology online and look that up. So that's a good word, but that's what this is. Now,
Bixley's at shithouse. Okay, I just missed it. What the reasoning behind why you didn't turn it into a compound now was the medical experimentation.
Because there's actually a court case in the States where the Supreme Court ruled that they would not accept any further filings from Russell J. Gould or David Wynne-Miller. And the reasons why they wouldn't was because of the language that they used. So because with the fiction, I'm not using quantum, but I sort of am. But for example, if this was to be syntaxed, this is definitely not quantum, definitely not definitely not quantum.
Well, there's no timestamp.
No, it's because these words modify each other. So medical modifies experimentation, which modifies participation, which modifies ultimatum. And then you come back, so that there's modification all the way through. But that's conversation for another place. You know why are you snickering, Rick?
Well, I reckon you should describe it why you can't, because it's why can't you have it? Yeah, use the past asyntax grammar.
Well,
just for the people that haven't probably heard you talk about it before, mate, that's all.
Okay. So if you were to syntax it, the words are a part of speech because of their relationships with other words. So there's a number code that goes like from 1 to 10, and you've got adverb verb, that'd be 1, 2.
I was meaning sort of like that there's no meeting of the mind.
Yeah, there's no meeting of the minds for a contract. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that's why you're not using the quantum language. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why, even though it is relevant because it is the correct sense and structure. Yeah.
Yeah. The other party is not proficient with that language, so they can't participate at the same level.
Isn't it a bit hypocritical? Because in essence, they're doing the same with us with legalese and glosser and dog lit and all that nonsense.
Oh, yeah, but now you're going to say something about like police are allowed to lie because it's part of their job, but we're not, and that's not right.
Not at all.
Yeah, but it must be because they say it. So this is why we can't have the Law Society the way it exists, and with the way they write stuff. It just can't be. It just can't be all the way through. Now, in light
very good Roman maxims, I reckon. Yeah, legalese is to deceive, and legality is not reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that really sums it all up.
So, just as a bit of a difference, I thought I'd read you all a poem, if you don't mind. And this is from the 1400s. Okay. So, judges there are whom gifts and favourites control, content to serve the devil alone and take from him a toll. If nature's law forbids the judge from selling his decree, how dread to those who finger bribes the punishment shall be. Such judges have accomplices whom frequently they send to get at those who claim some land and whisper as a friend, "'Tis I can help you with the judge. If you would wish to plead, give me but half. I'll undertake before him you'll succeed." The clerks who sit beneath the judge are open-mouthed as he, as if they were half-famished and gaping for a fee. Of those who give no money, they soon pronounce the state. However early they attend, they shall have long to wait. If comes some noble lady in beauty and in pride, with golden horns upon her head, her suit he'll soon decide. But she who has no charms nor friends, and is for gifts too poor, her business all neglected, she's weeping shown the door. But worse than all, within the court, we some relators meet, who take from either side at once, and both their clients cheat. The ushers too to poor men say, "You labour here in vain. Unless you tip us all around, you may go back again." The sheriff's hard upon the poor who cannot pay for rest, drags them about to every town on all assizes pressed, compelled to take the oath prescribed without objection made, for if they murmur and can't pay, upon their backs they're laid. They enter any private house or abbey that they choose, where meat and drink and all things else are given as their dues, and after dinner jewels too, or this were all in vain. Beadles and garçons must receive, and all that form the train. And next must gallant robes be sent as presents to their wives, or from the manor of the host some one his cattle drives, while he, poor man, is sent to jail upon some false pretence, and pays at last at double cost ere he gets free from thence. I can't but laugh to see the clerks whom once I knew in need, when to obtain a bailiwick they may at last succeed. With pride in gait and countenance, and with their necks erect, they lands and houses quickly buy, and pleasant rents collect. Grown rich they soon the poor despise, and new-made laws display, oppress their neighbours and become the wise men of their day. Unsparing of the least offence when they can have their will, the hapless country all around with content.
That would be good to send to lawyers.
Yeah, because you say, "Excuse me, but I resemble that remark." The point of all that is, that's like, what, 600 years old?
This stuff's been going on for a long time.
A long time. We don't need them anymore. Yes. And that's why when they're using terms such as honour, that's very, 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 very difficult one to swallow. Now, I just want to show people too, if you've had a fine or something's been decided in your absence,